is what it appears like to me. But the CHP will be moving very slowly because they want to get the message across to please get off the freeway, but ensure that they don't escalate any tensions or hostilities that result in anybody getting hurt. Not the drivers, not the officers, not the protesters. So far, what we saw earlier was it started with a fairly relaxed feel as they first took to the highway. Certainly when they marched through the street of San Jose, they were carrying signs and chanting, but there had not been anything that would lead to worries. But now that they're on the freeway, there is definitely the worry of their safety, but also of things perhaps escalating. But so far, it seems most of the drivers are willing. Whether it's family obligations or perhaps even an emergency situation, who may be caught in the middle of that. So the best advice we can give you right now is if you are going to be going through the San Jose area, if you were planning on taking Highway 101, going southbound, that is where the protesters are. It's shut down, but you should not even traverse it northbound right now because you can see CHP, they've shut off that stretch in both directions as this demonstration over the death of a black man in Minnesota, George Floyd, plays out, not just here in San Jose, but across the country. There was a protest in Oakland yesterday. We expect there to be another one in Oakland tonight. And even though an officer, the very first one, was arrested earlier today, Officer Chauvin, charged with third-degree murder 4 days after that video became viral. It is, to some people, not enough. There are those who ask, why was it not second-degree murder? There are others who do say that was moving very swiftly for the prosecutors. Opinion, as you can imagine, greatly divided, as so many things seem to be right now in our country, where people are looking at the same situation, but getting completely different reads and interpretations on what is happening. All we can tell you is that if you were planning on going through San Jose, you might want to avoid Highway 101. That is what the CHP is suggesting, because they're trying to diffuse the tension, diffuse situation. And it does look like some of the protesters are walking towards the edge of the freeway, towards the on-ramp. Not sure if they are actually, well, we do see a few people sort of looking like they're on the frontage road now or walking towards it. So we'll see if we can get a tighter shot here for you. Some of the protesters do appear to be leaving. Yes, this is a new development, breaking news. We've been some protests against what happened in the case of George Floyd, having taken over 101, stopping traffic, about 300 people at one point, and now it appears a large number of them are just walking peacefully off the freeway. Some are on bike, and they appear to be mostly walking away, and you can still see traffic really backed up there. You can imagine with the freeway in one direction being shut down for an hour now. And CHP officers are appearing to be successfully negotiating this with the protesters, which was their goal all along, that it would remain peaceful and the officers would try to de-escalate and the protesters would make their point, which they have very strongly and visibly, and then allow traffic to resume. So if you're just joining us, folks, it is now 4 o'clock and ABC 7 News at 4, technically starting right now, although we have been on the air for the past hour following breaking news. In the death of George Floyd, and today in Minnesota, the charging of the police officer who had put his knee on Floyd's neck for over 8 minutes, with Floyd saying, "I cannot."
And Minnesota. And so that explains why that charge in Minnesota, it's one of 3 states that has a third-degree murder charge in that state that police officer is now facing after being arrested today. But as we watch these protests live from Sky 7, been mostly peaceful for the past hour or so. A few broken windows on at least a couple of cars, maybe 3, and nothing more violent than that. A little bit of shouting here and there, but for the most part, very peaceful. You'll see at some point a digitized area on your screen, which we've blocked out because someone scrawled an obscenity on the freeway, and we don't want to show that to you if we can avoid it. But again, Kristen, looks like probably 100 or so protesters still in the middle of southbound 101. This is again at Alum Rock Road area, and the backup significant, although far less than it would normally be if we were not in a shelter-in-place order.
That is correct. And just to remind our viewers, of course, they've probably seen the video because it went viral. Police officer, 4 officers that were involved in the incident. One in particular seen on the video putting his knee multiple times on George Floyd, and Floyd was later killed. Derek Chauvin, you mentioned, was the first one and only one charged so far with third-degree murder and manslaughter, although prosecutors there made clear today that more charges may be coming. There are a lot of people who are calling for the other 3 officers who have also been
fired to be charged with the same. So we'll see what happens there. But this is one of many protests that have erupted around the country. This one in San Jose, that's been going on since about 3 o'clock, just past 3 o'clock this afternoon, blocking traffic, bringing it to a standstill at Alum Rock. So if you're headed south, that is where the protesters are making their stand, although you can see police have also closed off the northbound lanes at the moment as they negotiate the exit of the protesters. And Dan, as you mentioned, just in the last 10 minutes or so, we've seen about 2/3 of them leave the scene.
We did, which is interesting. We'll be interested to know why they were convinced or decided on their own to move elsewhere. Perhaps they are going to rally at a different location. Perhaps they had made their point and wanted to move on. There you see that digitized area. We're just blocking out a swear word. So we don't know where those folks have left. As you said, Christian, about 2/3 of the original gathering. And over the past hour, that number did grow until it sort of seemed to peak at last 15 minutes or so in terms of the numbers, and then 2/3 of them left the freeway just a few minutes ago. And you mentioned the officer charged today with third-degree murder, and 3 other officers may face charges as well. Prosecutors acting fairly rapidly in terms of how the justice system tends to work in the last couple of days to charge Derek Chauvin. That was probably a more easy arrest and charge to make because he was the one seen on video with his knee on George Floyd for 8 minutes as he begged for help and pleaded that he could not breathe. The investigation into the other officers' actions or non-actions probably more complex and will take more time as they try to piece together what they did and what they did not do during that unfortunate, awful incident that we all saw on video. This, again, one of the protests around the country today. They protested peacefully in Oakland yesterday, and a protest in Oakland is planned for tonight at, I believe, about 8 o'clock this evening. With any luck, that will also remain peaceful. But, of course, all of this reflects the great and growing frustration of not just the African American community, largely, of course, the African American community, but of all people of conscience who have reached a boiling point and are tired of seeing incidents like we saw in Minneapolis the other day on video. It just reflects a sense of injustice, and enough is enough.
I mean, back in February, there was the death of Ahmaud Arbery, black man who was jogging, 25-year-old jogging through a Georgia neighborhood when he was also shot to death. And 3 white men, a father and a son, and then also a neighbor now charged in that case. That one, of course, getting a lot of attention. And then, you know, earlier this week, of course, no death that resulted, but we saw a video coming out of Central Park in New York in which a white woman was heard and seen calling the police, repeatedly emphasizing to the police and saying she was being threatened, her life was being threatened by an African-American man who was peacefully just letting her know that she should leash up her dog. And that was on video, and, you know, she has since been fired. But there have just been a lot of incidents which, you know, coupled with the fact that people have been sheltering in place for 3 months during the coronavirus and many people losing their livelihoods and their jobs, it is ripe, if you will. All the ingredients are in place for the kind of tension to build and for people to explode in a way with raw emotions and frustrations coming out.
Yeah, well, very well said, Kristen. And I think it's so heartrending in some respects. In the last couple of months, we as a nation seemed so united in resolve to beat the coronavirus. And suddenly here we are, a reminder that there are great divides and great divisions in the country. On the phone with us now, Adrian Monroy, who is in one of the cars behind the protesters stuck in traffic on 101. Adrian, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Thank you for coming on. Dan Ashley, Kristen Z with you. Tell me how close you are to the protesters first, Adrian.
I mean, you say how close?
Yeah, how close are you?
Can you repeat that?
How close to the protesters is your car?
You're cutting off.
Okay, Adrian, we'll try to come back to you. I'm sorry you can't hear us, but we appreciate
I
it.
can hear you. I can hear you.
Okay, how close, where is your car? You're in traffic, correct?
Yes, I'm right here. Right off the 680. I can't really see the protesters, to be honest. There's a lot of cars in the way.
Okay, how long have you been there?
I've been there since like 3:40.
Okay,
Almost half an hour.
so about half an hour.
Sure.
What are your thoughts? You've probably seen the video that is sparking the protests that you are now in the middle of. What are your thoughts as you sit in traffic in terms of what is happening in the country and what is happening where you are now with the protesters? What is going through your mind?
I'm getting tired of it as well. Just because to get in the way with killing minorities. And yeah, I just people are arguing about people vandalizing in Minneapolis, but I'm actually okay with that because we've done it. People have just had this peacefully, and people still don't listen. Maybe this way they'll listen more. And right now, I'm okay with the protests too. As long as they're doing it peacefully here, it's totally fine. I just need to use the restroom as soon as possible, but okay. I'm okay with protesting.
Okay, I understand, Adrian. Let me just to paraphrase, Adrian is saying that he understands the frustration. He's okay with the protests. He understands why they're happening and hopes that they stay peaceful, but he's okay with what's going on here and around the country. He just hopes he can get to a restroom soon because he's been stuck on the freeway. You're probably not alone in that wish. Adrian, thank you very much for coming on. Stay safe. We appreciate it very much. Again, Kristen, as we look now, we have some live pictures on the left, ground-level shots of the protest, and on the right, we have obviously a fire that is burning. We're going to get you more information on that.
But with regard to public comments and sentiments on this, you know, what Adrian said, I'm seeing echoed in a lot of the Facebook comments as we stream this live on Facebook. A lot of people saying that, you know, this is a small inconvenience, and they respect their right to make the statements. And you know, we were talking about unity, and I just saw earlier there was a flag of Mexico out there, and I saw under the mast, you can see there were people of all races out there as well. So there is a sense of unity amongst the protesters. There you can see the flag, and there are signs that say Black Lives Matter, but let's be clear, black, brown, yellow, white, there are all types of people out there making the statement against what happened in Minnesota and the death of George Floyd, when a police officer who has now been charged had his knee on his neck for over 8 minutes as he pleaded and said, I can't breathe. So most people are, Dan, very understanding and saying, you know, this is peaceful, just be safe. But there are a few that are saying some unkind things that suggest, you know, if they were in a car stuck there, they might not just sit there and wait. They might just drive on through.
There's always somebody talking tough when they're not there, I suppose. You know, always somebody mouthing off. But I think most people can understand the frustration and appreciate this public display of outrage. When it tends to turn, as we've seen many, many times, Kristen, is when things become unnecessarily violent and there's a lot of vandalism or people and property getting hurt. That's when you tend to lose a lot of people in terms of support for civil disobedience. But these peaceful protests that we've seen here and in many other parts of the country that have not gotten out of control in any way have certainly raised awareness once again of a very serious divide and a very serious issue in this country. And to your point, Kristen, very interesting, very really uplifting and encouraging in many respects to see a quite diverse crowd there on the street. As you point out, plenty of white people, African Americans, people of Hispanic descent, you know, all groups are being represented standing there on Highway 101 at the moment.
Yes. Yeah, I would like to think that it is the Bay Area, although I know that might be a bit simplistic, but the unity is encouraging to see. Joining us by phone right now is Wee Tran, and he is someone who's been stuck in this for a while. Thanks for calling in.
Hi, I appreciate the chance to, share my perspective.
Yeah, please give us your perspective. How close are you to this? Have you, are you near the protesters, that line they formed, that blockade?
I was there for a while, but I kept the distance just because I'm close to people who have compromised immune systems, and I wanted to minimize any risks that might have exposure. But I was in the march from the start. Seeing the diversity of the people here, I myself am a Vietnamese American, but I wanted to show my support for the black community, and everybody coming together in this way, I think, showed the impact of the death of George Floyd, along with Breonna Taylor and all the others.
Yes.
It seems as if this is a turning point right now.
Hey, so are you now past that area?
Yeah, well, I took a step back just because at some point I was trying to continue to do a live feed, but the signal died. So I was trying to get away to a place where I can actually hear and see better. Okay,
Kristen, we have protesters on the move now, as you can see live. Looks like exiting the freeway en masse again. This is about the final third of the group that was there originally about 20 minutes ago. Looks like they are leaving the freeway, most of them now.
They have jumped across the center divide and crossed to the northbound side. And it does appear to be that they are exiting the freeway, and southbound traffic looks to be resuming there, Dan. Finally, cars are able to move again. The CHP set out to get the protesters to leave in a safe manner, and it appears they have successfully done so.
Yeah, thus far, which is wonderful to see. We don't know really how they persuaded them to do that, but we'll find that out. Or if the protesters decided they'd made their point, it was time to move on, because we don't see a significant police presence there at all. They are keeping their distance, of course, as most police departments around the country face these protests, with the heat focused squarely on the actions of police in Minneapolis. Law enforcement very cautious not to throw gasoline on the fire and provoke an already very tense situation.